I'm probably America's #1 and only Mystery Incorporated superfan, which honestly says more about my life choices than my expertise. But even I can't defend what the writers did to this show. So today, I'm ranking every major plot hole that completely broke the show's logic. Starting with our first plot hole, the Gatorsburg engine theft shows how even small oversights can break immersion faster than Shaggy breaks into a sandwich. The gang's engine gets stolen in Gatorsburg, forcing them to stay in the haunted town and investigate the fish freaks terrorizing the locals. The problem is simple but glaring, like Fred's ascot in direct sunlight. By the end of the episode, there's no sensible resolution as to how they get the engine back and leave the town. The plot just drops the issue entirely, leaving viewers wondering if the mystery machine suddenly develops self-healing properties or if the writers just forgot. While this seems minor, it represents a larger problem with Mystery Incorporated's ambitious plotting that would plague the series throughout its run. The writers would introduce story elements to serve immediate plot needs, then abandon them faster than Scooby abandons his diet when he sees a Scooby snack. It's the kind of mistake that makes you question what else the writers forgot about, like basic storytelling principles or the fact that cars need engines to work. This plot hole gets minor, but annoying. Ranking. Now here's how I'm deciding these rankings. And yes, I made a whole system because that's apparently what I do now. I'm measuring each plot hole by 3 factors: how much it breaks the show's established rules, how many episodes it affects, and how badly it damages the overall story. Mystery Incorporated tried to blend classic Scooby Doo mysteries with serialized storytelling, supernatural elements, and complex character arcs. When those elements clash, well, let's just say the results make the space cook look logical. If you get my drift, Alice May's true allegiances. This takes us into character motivation territory, classified as writer crime. Alice May's constantly changing loyalties make a weather vane look decisive. She's first introduced as someone seeking revenge for her father's imprisonment, positioning her as a sympathetic antagonist with clear personal stakes that viewers could understand and maybe even empathize with. Then the show reveals she's actually working for the mysterious Mr. E, completely changing her role faster than Daphne changes outfits. Her motivations and loyalties shift without proper explanation, creating more confusion than a Scooby snack shortage at a dog convention. The writers essentially retconned her entire character arc mid-show without bothering to explain how or why her goals changed so dramatically. This plot hole damages viewer trust because it feels like the writers changed their minds about Alice May's purpose while the episode was airing. Instead of feeling like a clever twist that recontextualizes earlier scenes, it feels like sloppy planning that left a major character without consistent motivation. The revelation that she was working for Mr. E all along should have felt like a shocking betrayal, but instead it just felt like the writers couldn't decide what story they wanted to tell. Not funny. Fred's mom's identity. This dives into the complex web of misdirection about Fred's true parents, classified as soap opera nonsense. The show builds mystery around Fred's family background like it's the most important thing since sliced bread, or in Shaggy's case, any bread at all. But here's where it gets messier than Scooby's eating habits after a particularly enthusiastic meal. The show reveals and retcons key information about his family repeatedly, creating more inconsistencies than a philosophical debate about whether a hot dog is a sandwich. Characters who were supposed to be dead show up alive, relationships get redefined without explanation, and family connections get rewritten based on whatever the current episode needs rather than what was previously established. If that sounds confusing, congratulations, you're following along perfectly because the writers sure weren't. The constant changes make it impossible to follow Fred's actual family tree or understand what his parents' true intentions were from the beginning. The writers seemed to change the family dynamics whenever they needed a plot twist, regardless of what they'd established in previous episodes. It's like they were playing Mad Libs with character relationships, except the results were supposed to make sense to an audience that was actually paying attention to continuity. The cursed treasures rules. This brings us to the supernatural elements, classified as magic doesn't work that way. The planispheric disk and treasure beneath Crystal Cove are central to the overarching story, representing the supernatural forces that have plagued the town since before anyone cared about consistent world building or logical magical systems. The problem is that the exact rules, origins, and magical limitations of the curse change more often than the gang's Monster of the Week schedule. Sometimes the curse affects everyone in town indiscriminately. Sometimes it's pickier than Velma choosing a sweater color that matches her socks. Sometimes it can be controlled by those who understand its power. Sometimes it acts independently, like a supernatural toddler having a tantrum. This inconsistency undermines the entire supernatural framework of the series in ways that go far beyond simple plot convenience. When the rules of magic change based on what the current episode needs rather than established mythology, It becomes impossible to predict what's actually happening or what the stakes really are. The curse becomes whatever the writers need it to be in any given episode, which is basically the worst kind of magic system imaginable. It's like having a video game where the controls change randomly without telling you, except somehow less fun and more frustrating. The Locket Timeline Problem. This shows how continuity errors can break an entire mystery arc, classified as peak writer crime. A locket discovered in early episodes becomes crucial evidence in the gang's investigation of the original Mystery Incorporated team and their mysterious disappearance decades earlier. Here's the timeline problem that would make even Time Squad throw up their hands in confusion. The locket is reported found and returned to its rightful place, suggesting the mystery has been resolved and everyone can move on with their lives. But later episodes treat the same locket as still missing, with characters actively searching for it like it's the last Scooby snack on Earth during a famine. However, this isn't just a simple continuity error that could be fixed with better script supervision. It's a masterclass in how not to track your own evidence across multiple episodes. The locket represents the show's larger struggle with maintaining consistent mythology across a serialized format. When key evidence appears and disappears based on plot needs rather than logical progression, the entire mystery framework becomes less reliable than Shaggy's diet plans or Fred's ability to set traps that don't backfire spectacularly. Romance reversals, classified as emotional whiplash. The show's most frustrating relationship problems make soap opera romance look stable and well-developed by comparison. The romantic dynamics between characters, especially Velma and Shaggy's relationship, start off-screen and end abruptly with less explanation than a typical monster reveal. The show expects viewers to accept that major relationship changes happened without showing the development or providing adequate explanation for why dynamics shifted so dramatically. Characters go from friends to lovers to strangers again with minimal screen time devoted to these supposedly important emotional arcs. It's like watching relationship speedrunning, except instead of being impressive, it's just confusing and emotionally unsatisfying. This creates a disconnect between cosmic-level supernatural threats and grounded character relationships that's more jarring than Scooby's voice changing mid-sentence during a particularly emotional scene. While the show can spend entire episodes on ancient curses and reality-bending mysteries that threaten the fabric of existence, it can't spare time to properly develop the human connections that should anchor the emotional stakes. It's a priority problem that makes the supernatural elements feel more real and believable than the actual human relationships between characters we're supposed to care about. Sheriff Stone's awareness. This reveals the inconsistent characterization that plagues supporting characters throughout the series, classified as Schrodinger's knowledge. Sheriff Stone is sometimes portrayed as completely clueless about the town's supernatural elements, treating every mystery like simple vandalism committed by teenagers with too much time and craft supplies. But in several episodes, he appears to be fully aware of the supernatural threats and even complicit in covering them up for reasons that are never adequately explained. His level of knowledge changes more dramatically than Velma's glasses prescription between episodes, creating continuity issues that affect multiple storylines without any logical explanation for his shifting awareness levels. The problem extends beyond just one character, acting like he has selective amnesia whenever the plot requires it. When authority figures have inconsistent awareness levels, it becomes impossible to understand the town's power structure or who actually knows what's happening behind the scenes. This uncertainty undermines the tension that should come from the gang working against official obstacles, because apparently those obstacles change their effectiveness and knowledge base depending on what the current episode needs, rather than what makes sense for the character or the ongoing storyline. VILANE motivations. This exposes the logical problems with antagonist planning throughout the series, classified as criminal incompetence. Many villains, once unmasked, admit to elaborate schemes that make less sense than Scooby speaking perfect English when he's scared, or Fred successfully setting a trap that works exactly as intended. The classic example is villains who risk exposure, imprisonment, and violence to achieve goals they could have accomplished by simply asking nicely, filling out the appropriate paperwork, or having a reasonable conversation with the relevant authorities. They'll create elaborate monster costumes, commit serious crimes that could result in decades of prison time, and put innocent people in genuine danger when a simple conversation or legal action would have been more effective and infinitely less likely to involve meddling kids with a talking dog. Only one thing makes this worse than simple criminal stupidity. Partly show treats these illogical plans as if they make perfect sense within the context of the story. Characters rarely question why someone would choose the most complicated and dangerous path to achieve relatively simple goals, leaving viewers to wonder if anyone in Crystal Cove took a basic logic class or if critical thinking is just banned in small towns with supernatural problems. It's like the entire population collectively agreed that the most convoluted solution is always the best solution, regardless of risk, cost, or common sense. The multiple mystery incorporated teams. This brings us to the cosmic mythology problems that define the show's biggest ambitions, classified as Chosen One Confusion. The series reveals that multiple Mystery Incorporated teams have existed throughout history, all drawn to Crystal Cove by the same supernatural forces like moths to a very spooky flame that keeps burning across generations. So which element actually matters in the cosmic scheme of things? The specific people with their unique personalities and skills, or the supernatural calling that seems to work regardless of who responds to it? The show never explains how or why only this particular team can end the town's curse, or how previous teams actually failed despite allegedly being chosen for the same purpose by the same supernatural forces. This creates a fundamental question about destiny versus coincidence that the show refuses to answer in any satisfying way. If the supernatural forces keep calling different teams across history, what makes this group special beyond being the protagonists of the current series? Are they more skilled, more determined, or just luckier than their predecessors? The lack of explanation makes the entire Chosen One narrative feel arbitrary rather than meaningful, which undermines the epic stakes the show is trying to establish. The Vanishing Locket, Diamond. Continuity error. This shows how the writers lost track of their own evidence, classified as evidence amnesia. In The Secret of the Ghost Rig, Mayor Jones clearly states that the gang returned the missing diamond, treating it as a resolved plot point that no longer needs attention from either the characters or the audience. But in a later episode, the same diamond is again described as missing, with characters actively searching for it as if the previous resolution never happened. The show treats the same piece of evidence as both found and lost simultaneously, depending on what the current episode needs for its plot to work. This indicates a clear oversight in story continuity that suggests the writers weren't keeping track of their own solutions to mysteries. The writers essentially forgot their own resolutions, which creates a continuity error that makes it impossible to follow the logical progression of the overarching mystery. When crucial evidence can simultaneously exist and not exist based on plot convenience rather than narrative logic, it becomes impossible for viewers to understand what's actually been resolved and what's still a mystery. It's like having a checklist, but forgetting to check things off. Except the checklist determines whether major plot points make sense. Unexplained book Breaking the Window. This demonstrates the show's inability to distinguish between genuine mysteries and random plot devices, classified as supernatural randomness. In Season 2, Episode 10, Night Terrors, the gang is startled when a book breaks through a window with tremendous force, suggesting supernatural intervention in what should be a relatively safe indoor environment. The problem is there's no clear explanation or follow-up for this incident, leaving viewers with a permanently unresolved supernatural event. The book throwing remains completely unexplained and is never contextualized, even by later reveals about the episode's true antagonist or the town's supernatural elements. It's just a thing that happens and then gets forgotten by both the characters and the narrative. This creates a lingering plot thread that feels more like a production mistake than intentional mystery building. When the show introduces supernatural events that serve no narrative purpose and receive no explanation, it suggests the writers were adding random spooky elements without considering their impact on the story's logic or internal consistency. It's like throwing confetti at a wall and hoping some of it sticks to create atmosphere, except the confetti is unexplained supernatural phenomena that breaks the show's own rules about what requires explanation. The mysterious hooded figure with the note. This reveals how the show would introduce intriguing elements without planning their resolution, classified as teasing without payoff. In Season 1, Episode 8, The Grasp of the Gnome, Velma receives a mysterious note from a hooded figure who appears briefly and then vanishes into the shadows like some kind of supernatural postal worker. The show never reveals who this person is, what their purpose was, or how they connect to the larger mystery that's supposedly driving the entire series. The hooded figure becomes a lingering, unexplained plot string that suggests important information while delivering nothing concrete to either the characters or the audience. However, this isn't just a minor oversight that could be forgiven in a less serialized show, it's a fundamental problem with how the series handles foreshadowing and mystery elements. The mysterious note delivery implies someone is secretly helping or manipulating the gang's investigation, but without resolution, it becomes meaningless foreshadowing that leads nowhere. The writers created the illusion of deeper conspiracy without actually having a deeper conspiracy to reveal, which is like promising a surprise party and then forgetting to plan one. The disappearing character Boren. This shows how supporting characters could vanish mid-episode without explanation, classified as character teleportation. In Season 2, Episode 8, Boron, a mine worker who seems important to the episode's central mystery, shows the gang a wrecked ship and provides crucial information about the supernatural events plaguing the area. Then Boron simply vanishes from the narrative with no explanation or aftermath, even as the episode continues and other characters discuss the information he provided. He disappears as completely as if he never existed, leaving viewers wondering what happened to someone who seemed important enough to have a name and specific knowledge about the mystery. The problem extends beyond just one missing character who fell through the cracks of the episode's plotting. When people can disappear from the story without explanation, it suggests the writers viewed supporting characters as disposable plot devices rather than actual people who should have logical exits from the narrative. It creates a world where characters exist only as long as they're immediately useful to the plot, which breaks the illusion that these are real people living in a consistent, fictional world. Supernatural vs. Rational explanations. This represents the show's fundamental identity crisis, RATIS, classified as genre collision disaster. Mystery Incorporated mixes genuinely supernatural threats with the classic man-in-a-mask format, but never reconciles how the town and the gang can accept both existing simultaneously without everyone having constant existential breakdowns about the nature of reality. Characters will encounter actual magic, cosmic entities, and supernatural curses in one episode, then act surprised by fake monsters in the next, like they have selective memory loss about previous supernatural encounters. The show can't decide whether it wants to be a supernatural horror series or a traditional mystery show, so it tries to be both without explaining the contradiction or establishing consistent rules for how these different types of threats coexist. Here's the decisive scenario that breaks everything. When real supernatural threats exist alongside elaborate hoaxes, how do characters determine what's genuine and what's fake without just guessing randomly every time they encounter something unusual? The show never establishes rules for distinguishing between actual magic and clever tricks, leaving viewers more confused than Shaggy in a health food store trying to find something that qualifies as actual food. The characters should logically assume everything is supernatural given their experiences, or they should be more skeptical of genuine supernatural events, but instead they flip-flop based on plot convenience. MRE's inconsistent motivations. This represents the show's biggest villain motivation problem, classified as character schizophrenia. Mr. E is simultaneously shown as helping and opposing the gang's search for the disc and the truth, switching sides based on what each individual episode requires, rather than consistent characterization that makes sense for a single person with coherent goals. There's no rational explanation for his alternating between warning the gang about dangers, revealing critical clues that advance their investigation, and actively trying to stop them from discovering information that threatens his plans. His behavior becomes completely unpredictable because the writers needed him to serve different plot functions without establishing coherent motivation that would justify his contradictory actions. Given that he wants the treasure and knowledge for himself, his inconsistent actions make no strategic sense from any perspective. Sometimes he helps the gang get closer to information that threatens his goals. Sometimes he opposes them when cooperation would actually serve him better in the long run. His motivation changes to fit plot needs rather than logical character development, making him less a character than a plot device that can be whatever the current episode needs him to be. How the original team catches up. This demonstrates how the show's climactic moments could break basic physics and geography, classified as teleportation magic. The original Mystery Incorporated team somehow arrives at a crucial location behind the new gang, despite insurmountable obstacles that should have prevented their arrival entirely. The plot clearly shows that reaching the location requires swimming through flooded tunnels and navigating dangerous terrain that the original team would not have been able to cross as quickly, or at all, given their age, physical condition, and the scene setups from previous episodes that establish the difficulty of the journey. This creates a continuity error where characters can teleport past obstacles when the plot demands their presence for dramatic effect. The writers needed the original team at the climactic location for emotional impact and narrative closure, but they forgot to account for the physical impossibility of their journey, given what had been established earlier. Their sudden appearance feels like a magic trick rather than logical storytelling, making the climactic reunion feel unearned and breaking the audience's suspension of disbelief at a crucial moment. Mayor Jones's change of heart. This reveals character development that defies all logic, classified as personality transplant. Mayor Jones starts as a criminal mastermind who kidnapped Fred, orchestrated elaborate crimes, and manipulated the town's supernatural elements for personal gain, like some kind of supernatural mob boss with a municipal planning degree. Then suddenly he becomes a sympathetic, even apologetic character with no redemption arc or logical explanation for his transformation. The show expects viewers to accept that a major antagonist completely changed his personality and motivations off-screen, presumably during a commercial break or between episodes. This isn't character growth or development, it's character replacement, without bothering to explain what happened to the original version or how this dramatic change occurred. The show treats this transformation as if it's natural and expected, but there's no bridge between the manipulative criminal and the regretful father figure. It's like the writers forgot what they'd established about his character and just started writing him as a completely different person with the same name and appearance, hoping nobody would notice the complete personality swap. The reset ending. This is the ultimate plot hole that makes everything else irrelevant, classified as nuclear option. The final episode uses a universe reset trope to undo all of Crystal Cove's tragedies and mysteries, essentially hitting a cosmic reset button that makes the previous 2 seasons feel like an elaborate fever dream that the audience imagined. This ending erases nearly all character growth, plot threads, and mysteries by fiat, leaving almost every major story arc unresolved in the most definitive way possible. The show literally undoes its own narrative accomplishments, making the entire journey feel more meaningless than a participation trophy in a rigged competition where everyone knew the outcome was predetermined. The reset doesn't just solve the show's problems, it erases them entirely, which is like solving a math problem by throwing away the worksheet. Every character development, every emotional moment, every mystery solved and relationship built gets wiped away as if it never happened. The writers essentially admitted that they couldn't figure out how to resolve their complex plotting, so they just decided to make it all go away, instead of doing the hard work of crafting satisfying conclusions to the storylines they'd spent 2 seasons building. If you enjoyed this video and want to watch my video about the saddest moments in Scooby Doo, click the video on the screen.